Welcome to our EM service. We are glad you are here. Our title for today is The Secret to Success is No Offense. If we can switch to the title slide in the back, we're having some changes. There we go. Okay. So, the secret to success is no offense. Out of Genesis 37 to 50. So I want you to pair up or triad up, okay, in groups of 2, maybe 3 if you really need to, okay? But find the person that we're going to do something really special with them right now, okay? So find your person, go find your person. You're next to them already, great. Go find your person. Esther and Nick, go together because it's going to be fun, okay? And then you guys try it up, you two. There we go. Nayoung, go back there. Okay. Find your person. You're going to face each other. Oh, it would have been more funny with Esther, okay? Okay. Look at that person in the face. Look at your partner in the face, okay? That's not the point. The point is look at them in the face, okay? Look them in the face. Open your eyes really big. Okay, look them in the face. Okay. Now, what you're supposed to do is think of the most offensive thing you can say to that person, okay? But you're gonna do it to each other. Okay, so whatever you do, you're gonna get it back, okay? So think in your brain, and if it's really too much, please don't do it, okay? This is a joke, mostly, okay? So the most offensive thing that's funny, and they will handle it well, that you can think of. Nick suddenly wishes he was with Esther, okay? But think of the most offensive thing you can say, and tell them. Ready, set, go, okay? Think of the most offensive thing you could say. Jackson and Jisung are together. The most offensive thing that you could ever say, okay? Okay, but you have to each say it to each other. So whatever they dish to you, you gotta dish it back, okay? Okay, looking at people's reactions, we got some really good ones here, okay? Okay. Only Nick and Esther and I are old enough to be in the generation of yo mama jokes, you know? That was the ultimate diss was yo mama jokes. Okay, hold on. Are we done? Are we done offending each other? Who is truly offended? It's not okay. Okay. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, so what was the content about, most of you? Give me some ideas. What did you guys say to each other? Materialistic? Okay, so it's based on someone's character or someone's what they do. What else? Jaden and Jalen, I saw some laughing going on. What did you guys say to each other? And it's her birthday, so, she forgot, okay? Just kidding. What was it generally about? Is it about the way they look? No? Okay, you guys are not that shallow. Other Jalen's not in her head. It was about the way they look, no? Did you offend Grace at all? She couldn't do it. Grace, could you offend her? No? Oh, that's so sad. Nick.
No, she goes racist.
Okay, Jackson, what did you say to my son? Just kidding. You guys are so bad at offending each other. You guys are really bad. Okay, wait. What was going on here? What was it about? Was it about the way they look? No. Was it about the way they talk? What? Personality. So something about that person, right? You're not offending what they do. You're kind of offending the true, most offensive thing is to offend the essence of that person, right? Something they can't change. Whatever you probably dissed Jaden about is something she can't easily change about herself, right? I see other sisters back here also laughing at each other, okay? What was your content about? What was it about? Ayong is turning bright red. I want everyone to look at Ayong because she is a bright red, okay? I have not seen her that red. But apparently you have to be sisters to be able to offend each other, okay? Jalen has something in mind for her sister later on today, okay? Okay. So everyone has something that they said. Now, this was supposed to be a joke, okay? My husband, I asked him, what he would say about me, and he's how true do you want me to be and how much trouble am I going to get into? I was like, well, depends on what it is. And so he talked about, what did he talk about? I am very bossy. which I hear that from my brother all growing up also, very bossy. And, I'm not, thanks, baby, okay. I'm probably the bossiest to my child, but, I'm really bossy. And there's something else he said. Anyway, stuff that I can't change, man. I'm just going to be bossy the rest of my life. You know why? It's because the rest of the world should just do what I say. Then life is easier, right? Okay, just kidding. The point being, when you're really trying to offend someone, which most of you, I'm sure you wake up, that's your life purpose, right? When you're trying to offend someone, it's because you're hitting the essence of who they are. Now, most of you are not waking up trying to offend someone, but most of us get offended, right? At some point, somewhere along the line, someone will offend us. And I think the worst offenses are the ones that are not intentional. Like today was intentional, okay? So clearly it was but when someone offends you and they actually don't mean to, but they do, that person that you're like, are they joking or are they not joking? But it's a little bit too true to be funny, And they kind of hit you at a really really raw spot, it hits you in a raw spot. Now, the definition of offense is this. If you Google offense, it will come up with offense, a team offense, or the other definition is this. Next slide. Offense, that's a different, right? Offense and offense, okay. Offense is resentment brought about by a perceived insult or disregard for oneself. This was interesting. So it's resentment from perceived insult. To you, it might be an insult. If Jalen Rue hears that she's bossy, she probably won't be offended because she's not that bossy. But growing up, I was real bossy. And when I heard my brother tell me I'm bossy, I was slightly offended because it was also slightly true. And so that's why it's a perceived insult to me. It's something about myself. It's it hits a sore spot, All of us have an ego. All of us have pride. And usually we get offended by something that bruises our pride. Now, why am I talking about offense and being offended? Because in life, at some point, you will grow some measure of resentment towards God if you're human. Okay? At some point in your life, even if you don't actually get resentful, you will be tempted, at least tempted, to grow resentment towards God in your life because you're human. And I think that's one of the things that takes us furthest from God than anything else. You could murder someone, please don't. You could commit all this sin, but honestly, I think the sin that takes you the furthest away from God is resentment towards him. That's, I think, one of the most slippery slopes with God. Because oftentimes you've grown resentment, you've grown offense towards him, and you don't realize it until you're already very far away. And then your heart is shut down. I think I told you guys this. So you guys all know I am very close to being done with my counseling program. And what they tell you is this. Most people, when they're individual, they call you for therapy, okay? Most people call you, nobody calls. Because, Grace, right? This job, nursing, it's hard. Because everyone's sick. No one comes to you happy, right? It's the worst. Everyone's just always sick. So when they call for therapy, they're not happy. Usually individuals they call because they're at the last rope. This is the rock and a hard place for them. They are at the end of their wit. They need help majorly. And usually when someone is at their wit's end, that's when they actually grow the most. That's when they actually benefit the most. When I hear I'm at my wit, I'm good job, great. I'm glad because we'll get work done together. But when I have a couple call me, and they're we're at our wit's end. If it's the wife that calls me, or the woman, the female of the couple, if it's, male-female couple, if it's the lady, then I'm okay, tell me what's going on. Guaranteed, the research shows couples that come in for counseling, they should have come in 7 years earlier. That's what the research, on average. 7 years earlier is usually when whatever that issue is now that's blown up and it's so big and they're at their wits' end, it usually started about 7 years ago. That's how long couples are willing to turn a blind eye. They're willing to like pretend everything's okay until it's not, okay? Now, when the male partner of the couple calls, you know what they say? All couples counselors are like, if the male calls, it's like 99% game over. Like 99% game over. Because if the female is calling, there's always chance. There's always a chance. But if the guy is calling and the wife is done, it's like game is over. Because once she's checked out and her heart is gone, it's literally almost game over. It's like code blue for couples. So, why? Why is that? Most of us in this room are women, so we're a little bit biased. I'm a little biased, okay? But most women, I think once our hearts are done, once you have built up enough resentment and your heart is shut down and done, it's done. It's almost like that person is dead to you because that's how much resentment we've built up. That's a little bit what it's like when we get offended towards God. It's a little bit like that. It's like you and I allow this resentment to build up often without us realizing it. No couple is like, I feel like I'm slowly resenting you. Like no one does that, okay? Like you wake up one day and you're like, I'm done, you know? But it's been a slow progression over years and years. And that's the same thing that can happen with us and God. When something hard happens in our lives, how do we repair? If we don't repair, resentment grows under the surface. And that point when you start to explode, that resentment has been like boiling there for a long time. And so the important thing is to catch resentment growing before it boils over. Before it boils over. Now, our last person we're talking about Genesis is Joseph. And Joseph is very famous for lots of things. And there's lots of angles I can take on Joseph's story. But as I was preparing for today, I realized that this was the angle that God was putting on my heart. Resentment. Because Joseph, more than probably anybody else in Scripture, has every right to be super bitter and resentful towards his family and towards God. He has the most right, probably, out of anybody. And yet we see in his life story a totally different outcome. I'm pretty sure none of you in this room have been sold into slavery by your siblings. Like you might not like them very much some days, okay? But you have not sold them into slavery, okay? I mean, maybe you're tempted, but you haven't, and you shouldn't, okay? That's not a good idea. Joseph faced a lot of crap, a lot of hard things in his life. And so I want you to see what's going on in his life story to figure out when these things happen in my life, how do I not grow resentful? But how do I actually continue to have a heart that is soft and open before God? So here's Joseph. Remember, Abram is his grandfather, great-grandfather. Isaac, one son, right? Isaac. 2 sons, twins, Jacob. They fought. Jacob won. And Jacob he ends up having 12 sons, many daughters. But he has one favorite wife, Rachel. She's the pretty one. And Rachel has 2 sons, Joseph and then Benjamin, okay? So Joseph is his favored son. How many of you were the favorite child? You are the favorite child, okay? How many of you know that the other child is the favorite child, okay? Like there is a favorite child, right? In every family, okay? We don't have favorites in our family, okay? But the point being, there is like a favorited child. Joseph was so favored so obviously that he didn't even care. Everything was better. Everything was more just for Joseph, to the point where his brothers resented him and hated him. So here we have an opportunity for Joseph to be super offended at God. Okay, offense number 1. Joseph gets unjustly sold into slavery by his own brothers. Okay? Remember, he's one of the younger ones. So these are all of his older brothers that he looks up to. You know, like annoying siblings who like follow you around with your friends, don't leave you alone. That's what he did. And they hated him. But he was also kind of spoiled and kind of dumb. So like he would talk about all the dreams that God would give him, about how his brothers will bow down to him one day. And they're like, dude, you're like, like you're crazy. And so one day he's coming, bringing food for them. Again, he's the one that spared the hard labor in the field. He gets to eat like the macarons under the shade, okay? And then here he comes with food for his brothers. And here we are in verse 23. So when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe, that's his special robe he was wearing. Then they grabbed him and threw him into a cistern. A cistern is like a giant well. So have you ever tried climbing out of a well? Don't do it. It's not a good idea, okay? There's no water in the well. The opening is small, the inside is big, but to get out, it's very small. And so Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain by killing our brother? So they've already contemplated killing him. But they're like, we don't benefit out of this. So why don't we just sell him to those traders? So Joseph's brothers pulled him out, and he's probably thinking, man, that was a really bad practical joke. And then they sell him for 20 pieces of silver, and he gets taken away to Egypt. Now, that sounds a little crazy nowadays, but actually that does happen in our world today. I was reading an article about trafficking. All of you guys know, trafficking is a very real thing, and it happens. Actually, I heard, through DIA, there's a lot of trafficking at our airport. But, when we go to the bathroom, there's those signs. It's if you need help, call this number. There's a reason why those things are up. But I read this article of this. Most people think it happens in, third world countries, and it does there, too. But there's a story of this young girl who I think when she was, maybe 12, 13, so Caitlin's age, she had a stepsister who was older, she was also trafficked, but then she got her into that world basically. And literally she would go to middle school during the day and do homework and was a good student. And then literally at night, they would come and grab her and she would get trafficked in that neighborhood. And there's a suburb, a quiet suburb. And this went on for years and years before she got out. Can you imagine, your own sibling, your own someone in your family doing that, that is, probably one of the worst things that could ever happen to you. In my class, we have a trauma class that one of the ladies who teaches it, she herself was a trafficking survivor. And so she got into trafficking because her family got her into trafficking. Her own parents sold her into trafficking. She's white, middle class. Her parents were well educated. That's how they trafficked her as a young child. Isn't that insane? Those things, it just sounds absurd to us, but it does happen in our world more than we realize. And can you imagine the kind of trauma and betrayal and abandonment you would feel when it's your own family doing these awful things? Selling you literally. 20 pieces of silver is worth $200 in our day. You might not like your sibling, but I'm pretty sure they're worth more than $200. Do you know what I mean? That's literally what happened to him. If anybody could be offended in Scripture, it's Joseph. Joseph has every right to hate his family, every right to be angry at God. Absolutely, because of what he's gone through already. He's only 17 years old, around his teens. But what's interesting is that up until this moment, he was a spoiled teenager. But from this moment on, we never, ever see him complain. We never, ever see him say anything against God. I'm pretty sure he had a lot going on in his mind, a lot going on in his heart. But the question is, how could Joseph, who experienced at this point probably the most trauma out of anyone in Scripture so far, how could he be the one to not be offended? How could he be the one to not lose sight of God when he's been betrayed and hurt by the very people in his family who are supposed to be God's chosen people? It's like these are the Christians that did this to him, you know? How can you not be offended? There's only one key that we see in all of Genesis, 39, verse 2. It says this, the Lord was with Joseph. And his master saw, so who he got sold to in Egypt, that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. And so Joseph found favor in his sight, and Potiphar, his master, put him in charge of all that he had. The only answer we have as to why Joseph did not allow offense to grow in his heart is this: the Lord was with Joseph. Now, let's peel that apart. Remember, the root of offense, being offended, is self. Resentment because of perceived insult to me, to oneself. The root of offense is self. We get offended because it touches a nerve inside of us. It speaks something about us. When we love ourselves the most, more than anything else, it is very easy to get offended. But when we are with God, it does multiple things for us. The first thing it does is that it causes us to have perspective. Who's been on a plane recently? Okay, great. All right. Well, where'd you go, Sam? Just kidding. Somewhere special. Okay. You know when you go on the plane and you're like ascending or descending and you can see like houses still, you know, or like cars, and they look tiny, you know? But like think of yourself sitting in your car. Like you're pretty big. Like your car's pretty big, you know? But like look at how tiny those cars look on the freeway when you're up on the plane, you know? Like being up on a plane, like I used to, well, now being in a plane is very exciting because I have a lap child and another child next to me. But when I was young and traveling on my own, it was great because I was like, it kind of like made me reflect on life, you know? I was like, wow, I am so small. If this airplane blows up, no one's going to know. But whoever watches like the random news channel, you know, like we are so tiny in the grand scheme of things. Or who's ever been like on a cruise ship or like a boat in the ocean or the sea, okay? Y'all. So we were in Korea a couple years ago, and my father-in-law, he grew up on an island, so he loves like the ocean. So you were like, you know, like on the like annoying boats that move so much when you're on the ocean. And I just had this thought. I was like, oh my gosh, what if what if Shamu is under this boat and decides to come up and we just all die? I don't know. I have thoughts like this. And I was like, this is interesting. Like, I am so tiny in the grand scheme of things. Like, no one's ever thought that? I'm sure you all have, okay? When you go to the ocean, like how tiny you are in the huge ocean, like no one thinks that. Okay, great. Me and Jalen, we are existential. We're always having crises in our minds, okay? But like, think about how tiny you are in the grand scheme of things. That's what it's like when you're with God. It does both. It makes you realize just how small you and I are. But on the other hand, just how loved we are, that he would choose to be with us, be one of us. Remember, the root of offense is self. When self is huge, myself is the biggest, most important thing, you will become offended. The antidote to self, offense, is being with him. When you are with him, everything gets put into perspective. Everything gets put into perspective. You and I, most of the time, what we need is a perspective shift. One of Josiah's closest friends that we carpool with to school, we saw his family on Friday, or their family on Friday. And they have grandpa, grandma, it's very fun family. And we talked to all of them. And then yesterday, I got the news that the grandpa had a heart attack and passed away in a matter of 24 hours. We just saw him. And it made me realize, wow, life, you just don't know. You just don't know. We don't know. I'm pretty sure when you are on your deathbed, you will not be ruminating about whatever random offensive thing that Jalen told Jaden, right? Jaden, you're not going to be thinking about that, you know? It's not going to be on your mind. Because life and perspective. Being with God puts life into perspective. The second thing it does when we're with God is that you realize it doesn't matter where you go or what happens, it matters most who you're with. You know what I mean? Who has ever been on a vacation with a friend and you're like, never again am I going on a vacation with that friend? That friend is a local friend. We will only go to coffee shops and that's it. You know what I mean? Or you have those friends that you love traveling with them because they're so fun. Like, they make everything more enjoyable. It matters who you're with. Like, where you go is important, but who you're with is most important. Same thing in this life. Who you're with God is the most important thing. Because life will go up and down. You'll have crazy things change. It won't always be fun. But if you're with someone really beautiful and amazing and steadfast who will love you forever and always be with you, that will make every hard thing worthwhile. And that's what it's like to be with God. Now, what about you? Maybe right now, something has happened in your life and you have every right to be offended. Every right to be mad or upset or resentful. And that's okay. It's okay to feel that way. But let me ask you, how's that helping you? How's your best bud right now resentment sitting in your heart, boiling in your heart? How is it serving your life? It may be doing really great for you. Maybe not, though. Maybe it's time for a perspective shift to realize that that one thing that one person said really doesn't matter. Now, Joseph was big, okay? His was a big deal. But he realized in the grand scheme of things that who I'm with and who I really am before God, that's what really matters. Now, you know the saying, when it rains, it pours, or those people who like have a bad thing happen, they can't catch a break? That's Joseph, okay? It's bad enough to be sold off to slavery. But he goes to Egypt, again, foreign land, doesn't know the language, doesn't know the culture, and the Egyptians at that time thought that Hebrew people were kind of like lower class, you know? And so he's a slave. But he does well in Potiphar's house. And he's like a really handsome dude, you know? Like, got big muscles. You know what the Egyptians wear? Next to nothing. So, like, he always looks, like, really nice, you know? And so Potiphar's wife, his master's wife, is making googly eyes at him, you know? Because, like, he's a good-looking young man. And so she's trying to seduce him, literally. And in all, technicality in that world, she could have done that, right? Because he's just a slave. He's supposed to just listen to whatever, right? They're supposed to do. But he's like, I cannot do that. And so he runs away from her, but she falsely accuses him of trying to, you know what I'm talking about, y'all? Because I cannot say those things with young ears in this room. So not only, then he's sent to prison as an innocent man, falsely accused. This could not get any worse. Falsely accused, imprisoned. He has every right to be offended and angry. But here we see in 39, verse 21, if we keep going. But the Lord was what? Was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. Again, God was with Joseph, but this time we see God showed him steadfast love and favor. When you're with God, you experience steadfast love. There's nothing more powerful than steadfast love. That no matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter where you go, that he will always love you. That's something we say to our kids all the time. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, no matter where you go, we will always, no matter what. That is who God is. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter where you go, he will always love you. That kind of steadfast love we experience when we are with him. And when we're with God, not only do we experience that love, we experience favor. true favor, and true success. How many of you ever experienced that kind of favor? Like, you work hard too, okay? And you've like done important things. But there's also been moments in your life where you're like, man, that was like some kind of like, that was just coincidence. Like, that was favor, you know? Like, somehow God connected you to this person, this person, this person, and then like all these things happen. Like, that's favor. God puts favor on his children, that they will experience good things. Favor helps us realize that God is really behind the scenes. So let me recap really fast, okay? The secret to true success, God's kingdom success, always upside down, always backwards, always different from this world. The true thing to success in God's kingdom is no offense. Less of me and more being with him. That's opposite of this world. This world's like, if you want to get anywhere, if you want to do anything, you got to watch out for yourself. You got to love yourself. You got to take care of yourself. You got to like get your way. That's what the world says. But God says true success is found in no offense and being with me. Less of self, more perspective, more of my favor. That is the way to true success. Now, when Joseph was able to overcome those two major offenses, like imagine being in prison for years. It wasn't just like a one-day thing, it was a couple years he was in prison. What was he thinking in that time? And yet, his heart did not grow offended at God because he was like, he is with me. And when I'm with God, everything goes into perspective. That's when he was able to break through. So we know Joseph's story. At 30 years old, 30 is when it all starts happening, y'all, okay? So you guys got some years to go. It's all good. 30. He turns 30 around that time, and that's when Pharaoh has a dream. And Joseph interprets the dream. There'll be 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. And with that, Joseph goes from literally the prison to being second in command of the whole country. It's like becoming the vice president of America, okay? Like that's how far up he goes in overnight, in an instant. And he helps the country, 7 years of gathering. So when the famine hits, they are ready and so prepared that they're able to sell to the neighboring nations that are also in famine. But guess who's also experiencing famine? Joseph's family, far away. They're all hungry. Remember, this is the family that's supposed to experience Messiah. Like, Jesus is supposed to come through this family. If they all die out in a famine, there is no Messiah. There's no Jesus that can come through. Because this is the family God said would come through. He can't change his word. So just kill the whole family off, right? That's the best way to do it. And so their family is at risk. So the brothers come. He recognizes them instantly, but they don't recognize him. They bow down before him. Literally, his dreams come true before his very eyes. And he's kind of testing them to see if they've changed, and they have changed. And so finally, Joseph, in this last passage, Genesis 45, verse 4, he breaks down and he's like, I'm Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. But don't be upset. Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. Again, God has sent me here ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve many survivors. And in case you don't get it, again, so it was God who sent me here, not you. He's the one who has brought me to this place of being second in command. He's not just not offended. He's realizing, okay, through all of this hardship, through all of this suffering, all of this betrayal, still God has used this to do something miraculous. Joseph does not minimize the wrong. He's like, yeah, you sold me, correct. You're the ones. And yet, because Joseph has spent all these years, instead of nursing his resentment, you know those people who are advanced in years and you see them and they're like crotchety? You know what I mean? Like they're kind of crotchety and cranky and grumpy and like Scrooge, from like the Christmas Carol. Like that's what resentment looks like. It's what it does to you. It manifests on the outside too. And Joseph's like, I could spend time being resentful, or I can spend time being with God. And with God, I'm going to let my resentment not hold me back. I'm not going to grow offended at God. I don't think we understand how crazy this is. Joseph had every right to be offended at God, and yet he chose not to. And the only key we see is that he chose to be with God. Now, let me ask you. Maybe you are going through something that you can be like, God, why did you allow this? Or maybe you're stuck on something that happened in the past that you can't get over, that you're like, God, why did you allow this? Where were you when this happened? There are no easy answers for that because there is a lot of suffering in this world. There is a lot of brokenness in this world. Maybe you're the one that offended somebody. Whatever it may be, we're all tempted to grow offended at others and offended at God. But let me tell you, maybe you're like, I'm not offended. I'm like cool as a cucumber. Okay, great. Offense takes many forms. Offense can look like anger. Offense can look like resentment. Here's the killer. Offense can look like apathy. It looks like you don't care. That's what offense can look like. Offense can look like it can look like ignoring God. That's what offense can look like. And so, I want you to look at yourselves right now. Do I have any hint of anger, resentment, bitterness, apathy, not caring? Any of that right now in my heart, in my life? If the answer is yes, good job for being honest. Number 2, ask yourself this. Am I offended at God? Is there something that's happened in my life that I am offended at God? You can nurse that offense all you want, but it will not get you anywhere that will bring you life until you come before God. Second, if you do want to be free from that offense, will you make that choice to be with God? Will you make that choice? Because oftentimes most of us don't. Because with God, everything changes. But apart from Him, all you have to nurse are your resentments, all of us. And last, when you choose to overcome offense, you will experience the breakthrough. Most of us want breakthrough in our lives without actually surrendering our offenses. Let me say that again, that's important. Most of us want the breakthrough, like the blessings. We want the get me second in command in Egypt, please. Give me those things without surrendering our offenses, without coming before Him and experiencing His freedom. You cannot have the breakthrough without surrendering the offense. Can I have the praise team come up? Ultimately, when we are offended, it comes down to surrender. It's a choice. It's a choice of, will I hold on to this thing that person did that ruined my life? Because it gives me some illusion of power. Or am I willing to surrender? To surrender before Him. Let go of myself and surrender to God. Can we all stand? I don't know what you're going through in every moment. Maybe for one person in this room, this message struck a chord. You've realized you've been holding on to offense. You've been offended at God more than you've realized. And I am here to tell you that there is a better way, that there is an easier, more free way to to live than to hold on to offense. Come before the Lord today and surrender. Let it go. Let it go. And meet with Him. Be with Him. Experience the freedom that comes only from being with Him. Let's sing this song together.